Why can Prince Harry fly to London on his own, while Meghan, Archie and Lilibet stay thousands of miles away in California? It sounds like the setup for the usual royal family argument. Maybe Meghan does not want the children near the palace. Maybe Harry does not want them caught in the middle. Maybe it is another chapter in a private feud that has been playing out in public for years. But that explanation is almost too simple, because the biggest obstacle is not an invitation. It is not a room at a royal residence. And it is not even whether King Charles wants to see his grandchildren. The real question is this: if Harry brings his wife and children back to Britain, who is responsible for keeping them safe once they leave the gates? That is the detail hiding underneath almost every headline about the Sussex children and the UK. Harry can make a short trip alone. He can accept a certain level of personal risk as an adult. But bringing Meghan, Archie and Lilibet is a completely different decision. It means moving a family through one of the most intensely watched countries in the world, with photographers, crowds, old security concerns, and no guarantee of the type of protection Harry believes they need. And that changes the story. This is not a video about pretending that everyone in this family gets along. They clearly do not. There are years of hurt, distrust, public interviews, legal fights, and silence between the Sussexes and the institution they left behind. But when people ask why the children have not returned to Britain, the confirmed issue at the center of Harry's argument has been security. Not palace drama, not a simple parental ban. Security. That distinction matters because it changes Meghan's role in the story too. It is easy to turn her into the person standing in the way of a reunion. It is much harder to admit that the family may be facing a problem no private promise, warm invitation, or royal photograph can solve. A house can be secured. A meal can be arranged. A family meeting can be scheduled. But what happens on the drive there? What happens at an airport? What happens when the children are recognized? What happens when a route changes, a crowd appears, or a threat is detected? Those are not details a family can simply leave to chance. And for Harry, they are not abstract questions. If you have followed this story for years, you probably already know that Harry has spoken publicly about not feeling able to bring Meghan and the children to the UK under the current conditions. But the deeper story is not just that he is unhappy with the decision. It is why that decision exists. What exactly changed after 2020? And why paying for bodyguards himself does not solve the problem. Because Harry and Meghan did not always appear to be saying, "We will never come back." For a time, there was a different possibility. The idea was that the family could travel together. Archie and Lilibet, who have spent almost all of their lives in the United States, could have had a chance to spend time in Britain again. For the children, it could have been a rare opportunity to experience their father's home country, not as a story told from across the Atlantic, but as a real place with family, history, and people who know them. Their last known visit to the UK as a family was in 2022, during the Platinum Jubilee period. Lilibet was still very young. Archie was only a little older. Since then, Britain has remained central to the public story around the Sussexes, but it has been far less central to the children's daily lives. That is one of the quietest consequences of this entire conflict. Archie and Lilibet are British by birthright, connected to one of the most famous families in the world, and tied to a country that remains fascinated by them. Yet they are growing up far away from the places that shaped their father. Their British connection exists through family stories, titles, photographs, and public debate, far more than through ordinary memories. And it is important to remember that a visit does not have to mean a grand royal return. It could have been something much smaller, a protected stay, time with relatives, a chance for the children to see the places their father talks about, a chance for King Charles to spend more time with grandchildren he rarely sees in person, a chance for the distance between the two sides of the family to feel a little less permanent. According to reporting around previous plans, the Sussexes were even open to staying in a royal residence during a visit. That detail is revealing. It suggests the issue was not simply, "we refuse to step onto royal property." A royal residence could offer privacy, staff, controlled access, and the practical security of a protected location. But there is a huge difference between being safe inside a residence and being safe outside it. A family does not travel to Britain only to remain behind a gate. They need to arrive. They need to move. They may need to attend private meetings, see relatives, travel between locations, and respond to changes in plans. And if they are high-profile targets, every movement can become a security calculation. That is where the entire plan began to fall apart. In the days around proposed visits, Harry's position has been that the security arrangements available to his family were not enough. The issue was not whether he could hire people to stand beside him. Harry can pay for private security. He has done so in the United States. The issue was whether that private protection could provide the same level of access, coordination, and authority as British police protection. And the answer, according to the system that governs these decisions, was not automatically. That is why a story that looks emotional on the surface is also deeply bureaucratic underneath. Behind the scenes, there are committees, risk assessments, intelligence, protocols, police resources, and decisions about who qualifies for what level of protection. The name that often comes up is RAVEC, the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures. It is the body involved in decisions about protective security for people at risk in the UK. Its job is not to settle family disputes or award someone for having a royal title. It looks at risk and decides what protection, if any, is appropriate. That point is crucial. Harry is still the king's son. He is still a prince. His children are still connected to the royal family. But after Harry and Meghan stopped being working members of the royal family and moved to the United States, the old assumptions about their security changed. The automatic arrangement was gone. From that moment, protection in Britain was no longer simply part of the role Harry had been born into or once performed. It became something assessed, case by case. And that meant the family could be invited to the country without being guaranteed the protection Harry wanted for them while they were there. For some people watching from the outside, that may sound reasonable. Harry and Meghan chose to step away from royal duties. Why, they ask, should British taxpayers pay for their security whenever they visit? That argument has been made again and again, and it is not hard to understand why it resonates with people who see the decision mainly as a question of public money and privilege. But Harry sees it differently. His argument is not simply that he deserves police protection because of his status. His argument is that the nature of the threats he faces is tied to that status, to his history, and to his visibility as a member of the royal family. In his view, the question is not whether he can afford guards. It is whether those guards can do the job that only state security can do. That distinction may sound technical, but it has real consequences. A private security team can protect a client. It can assess danger, plan journeys, control access to a home, monitor surroundings, and intervene in an emergency. Many famous people rely on excellent private protection every day. But private guards are not police officers. They do not have the same powers. They do not automatically receive the same intelligence. They do not control public roads. They do not have the same ability to coordinate with local police, manage protected routes, or respond to a rapidly changing threat environment through official channels. Imagine the difference between having a security team around a private home and moving a high-profile family through a public city. A private team can watch the street. Police protection can be part of a much wider system. Intelligence sharing, route planning, local coordination, emergency response, crowd management, and authority in situations where private personnel have limits. That does not mean private security is useless. It means it is not identical. And for Harry, identical is the standard he appears to be focused on. He has argued that he cannot simply bring his wife and children to Britain if he does not believe the protection available is adequate. That statement has often been reduced to a dramatic soundbite. Harry says he cannot bring Meghan back. But the children are at the heart of it too. When an adult travels alone, They can decide what level of risk they are willing to take. They can move quietly, limit appearances, accept a shorter trip, or simply make a personal calculation that the visit is worth it. Parents do not make that calculation only for themselves. They have to decide whether a risk is acceptable for their children who did not choose the public attention surrounding their family. They have to decide whether a visit is worth the possibility of exposure, disruption, fear, or danger. And once that is the question, the standard becomes far more demanding. This is where Meghan enters the story in a more realistic way. We do not know every private conversation in the Sussex household. Nobody outside that family does. It would be wrong to present Meghan as the single person who forbids a trip, because the publicly established security dispute is Harry's and the family's larger problem. But it is reasonable to understand why Meghan, as a mother, might be unwilling to take the children into a situation Harry himself has described as unsafe. That is not proof of a secret personal motive. It is simply the context any parent would recognize. If the father says, "I do not believe I can safely bring my family there," then the mother does not need to be the villain of the story for the children to remain at home. And that may be the most misleading part of the public conversation. People often frame this as a choice between reunion and resentment. Either Meghan and Harry bring the children to Britain, or they are deliberately keeping them from their royal relatives. But that framing skips over the condition the Sussexes keep returning to. They do not want to make that trip without security arrangements they trust. The question is not only, why will they not come? It is also, what would need to change for them to come? Because once you ask that, the story stops being about a locked door at a palace. It becomes about the unseen system outside it, the security decisions, the legal battle, and the turning point in 2020 that made every future visit far more complicated. In 2020, that system changed. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from their roles as working members of the royal family and began building a life in the United States, they did not just leave a job. They left a structure that had shaped almost every part of royal life, including how security was organized. Before that break, Harry's protection had been understood as part of his position. He was a senior working royal, regularly appearing at public events, representing the crown and moving through the country under arrangements designed for members of the institution. After the break, the question became different. What level of protection should a non-working royal, living abroad and visiting the UK only occasionally, receive from the British state? That was not a question Harry could answer for himself, and it was not a question the palace could settle with a private family conversation. It was a question for the official system that evaluates risk. The result was a new arrangement. Harry would not have the same automatic, full-time, publicly funded police protection he had once received. Decisions about security would be made according to the circumstances of a particular visit and the assessed level of risk. On paper, that may sound like an ordinary administrative change. In real life, it created a fault line that has never gone away. Harry challenged the decision through the courts. His argument was not simply that he wanted the old privileges of royal life without the old responsibilities. He said the process had treated his circumstances unfairly and failed to account properly for the risks surrounding him and his family. The courts did not restore the protection arrangement he wanted. The legal outcome left the underlying system in place, and it left Harry facing the same practical question whenever a visit to Britain is discussed. Can he bring his family under the level of protection currently available? That is why this is not a one-off disagreement caused by one cancelled trip. It is a problem built into the new reality of the Sussexes' lives. They left Britain, but they did not stop being globally recognizable. Harry did not stop being the younger son of the king. Meghan did not become anonymous. Their children did not become invisible. In some ways, living outside the royal system made the security question more complicated, not less. They are no longer working royals, but they remain royal figures. They are private citizens in their daily lives, but their family relationships are public property. They live in California, but a visit to Britain can still create international attention. And every one of those contradictions lands on the same question: who is responsible when they return? Supporters of the official decision may say the answer is clear. A person who is no longer performing royal duties should not automatically receive the same publicly funded protection as someone who is. Security resources are limited. Public funds matter. And risk assessments, they argue, should be made by professionals rather than by personal preference or family rank. That is a serious argument. It should not be ignored just because the person making the complaint is Prince Harry. But Harry's side of the argument is serious too. He has said that the threat level around him cannot be separated from his birth, his public identity, and the history of the family he was born into. From his point of view, the fact that he stopped working for the crown does not erase the attention or the risks that come with being one of the most recognizable people in the world. And this is where the debate becomes emotionally impossible to separate from the facts. Harry grew up watching the press follow his mother everywhere. He has spoken for years about the effect Diana's death had on him. He has also described his fears about intrusive media attention and the possibility of history repeating itself in some form. None of that proves that a specific threat will happen during a particular trip. It does not mean every camera is a danger. It does not mean every visit to Britain would be impossible. And it does not mean the British authorities are ignoring risk. But it does explain why Harry's threshold for bringing Meghan and the children is likely much higher than the threshold for boarding a plane by himself. For him, this may not feel like a negotiation about protocol. It may feel like a red line. There is a difference between saying, "I would prefer more security," and saying, "I do not believe I can safely bring my family without it." The first sounds like a request. The second sounds like a boundary. And boundaries are difficult because they do not leave much room for symbolism. A royal residence can be offered. A reunion can be arranged. A public invitation can be extended. But none of those gestures answers the question Harry keeps raising about movement beyond the residence. That is why the message at the center of this story can seem so frustrating to both sides. From the palace's perspective, an invitation may be meant as an olive branch. It may say, "The door is open. Come and stay. Let the children know this part of their family." From Harry's perspective, the invitation may be incomplete. It may say, "You can come to the door, but the safety system you believe your family needs is not guaranteed once you step outside it." Those are not necessarily mutually hostile positions, but they are incompatible positions. And when two sides disagree about safety, affection alone cannot close the gap. This is the point where many conversations about Meghan go off course. It is tempting to give one person all the agency. To say Meghan is the reason the children are not in Britain. To say she is the obstacle between King Charles and his grandchildren. To say that if she simply changed her mind, the entire story would be over. But that conclusion asks us to treat the security issue as a cover story, even though it has been central to Harry's own public statements and legal action. We can recognize that Meghan may have her own feelings about Britain, the royal family, the press, and the life she left behind. Of course she may. Anyone in her position would have feelings. But feelings are not the same as proof. What is known is that the family's security in Britain has been a long-running dispute. What can be inferred is that Meghan is unlikely to want her children placed in conditions Harry himself describes as unsafe. What cannot honestly be claimed is that she alone has issued some private order preventing them from ever visiting. That may not create the clean villain and hero story people expect. It is more complicated than that, but it is also more believable. If you value royal stories that separate what is known from what is guessed, subscribe here. This family generates a constant stream of confident claims, and the most important details are often the ones hidden behind the loudest headlines. Because once the security issue is treated seriously, the consequences become impossible to ignore. King Charles is not simply missing a photo opportunity with his grandchildren. He is missing time that cannot be recreated later. Children grow quickly. Their memories form quietly. A relationship with a grandparent is not built by titles, official statements, or a family tree. It is built by ordinary time together, a conversation over breakfast, a walk, a birthday, a joke repeated often enough that it becomes part of family language. For Archie and Lilibet, the distance is not just geographic. Britain is the place where their father was born. It is the country of their paternal grandparents and cousins. It is where a huge part of their family history is visible everywhere, from the buildings people photograph to the ceremonies people watch on television. But it is not necessarily a place they know through their own experiences. That is a very strange position for any child to be in. Their connection to the country is enormous in public terms and limited in private terms. Millions of people know their names, discuss their future, and argue about where they belong. Yet the children themselves may have few ordinary memories of the place at the center of all that attention. And nobody should pretend that a single visit would fix the distance. One carefully managed trip would not resolve the Sussexes' relationship with the palace. It would not settle the security dispute. It would not erase years of conflict or suddenly make the children feel equally at home on both sides of the Atlantic. But it could matter. It could give them something real, a sense that Britain is not only a topic in adult arguments, a sense that it is a place with people, rooms, voices, and family connections of their own. That possibility is what makes the security impasse feel so costly. The longer it lasts, the more every future visit becomes loaded with meaning. A simple family trip becomes a diplomatic event. A grandparent seeing grandchildren becomes proof of reconciliation or evidence of failure. The children's presence becomes a headline before they have even arrived. And the more symbolic a visit becomes, the harder it is to arrange, quietly and safely. That is the cruel loop at the heart of the problem. The family needs a low-drama visit to rebuild some sense of normality. But because the relationship is strained and the children are so rarely seen in Britain, any visit is almost guaranteed to attract enormous attention. That attention feeds the security concern. The security concern prevents the visit, and the absence of visits makes the next one even bigger. So when people ask, why does Harry go to Britain alone? The answer is not that he is free while Meghan holds the children back. It is that his own travel does not solve the risk calculation for a family of 4. An adult can choose to take a chance. A father may decide he cannot make that choice for his children. You may disagree with Harry's assessment. You may believe the current system is fair. You may think the Sussexes should accept the arrangements that are available if maintaining family ties is truly important to them. Or you may believe that the state has underestimated the special risks around Harry and his family. But either way, the actual dilemma is more serious than the tabloid version. It is not simply, will Meghan let the children visit Britain? It is, can Harry and Meghan trust the conditions of that visit enough to bring them? And for now, that question appears unanswered. The palace may be able to offer hospitality. The family may be able to express love from a distance. Harry may be able to make solo visits when circumstances require it. But an offer of a room is not the same thing as an offer of a security plan. Until those two things meet, every invitation will carry a limit built into it. The children may be connected to Britain by blood, history, and their father's memories. But connection is not the same as access. For Archie and Lilibet, Britain is still their father's home. It is still part of their story. But until their parents believe they can bring them there safely, it may remain a country they inherit before it becomes a country they truly know. And that is the invisible border in this royal story. Not a family argument, not a locked palace gate, not one person refusing to say yes. A boundary created by trust, security, and a question that no invitation alone can answer. If you think security should be the deciding factor in a situation like this, leave a like. And if you see it differently, share your view in the comments. Should Harry accept the protection available, or is he right to keep his children away until the arrangement changes?